Get ready for the Ochelli effect.
23rd day of October 2024, allegedly, according to that thing we call a calendar. And guess what? This is the Ochelli effect. Now, you could be hearing us on the live stream, of course, at Ochelli.com radio and through your various radio apps. But then again, you might also be watching the video, which I'm going to release a little bit after the audio. And we're going to need some visual elements tonight. But it is a Wednesday, the middle of the week, and we are broadcasting live on Ochelli.com radio. The video, again, not live, but it is being recorded. So, you know, I'm not going to make you look at my face too much tonight. We've got other issues and other images to discuss for sure. Special show tonight. Why? You know, it's kind of amazing. I've done hundreds of shows on the JFK assassination. Of course, I've done shows on many different topics, whether it be the news of the day, the historical events of this, that, the third thing, various writings, various films, filmmakers, etc. People that have created a lot of interesting material, whether it be academic or in the realm of entertainment. All of it barely relevant to tonight's discussion, but a grouping of shows, absolutely. Various appearances with a lot of different authors and interesting people, even witnesses to history regarding the JFK assassination. This is kind of a unique thing. I've got a guy on who is an author, indeed. You know, you could look for some older books like High Treason. You could look for that book. You could look for, well, let's just stop talking about the ones that I don't want to talk about and talk about the ones I do want to talk about. And in fact, you know what? I'm going to hold up a couple of books real fast here, just because visual aids are always helpful. And actually, I'm going to hold up 3 books for you. Why? Because they are a set of 3 that I think is not just required reading, but required viewing, and an absolute necessity if you care to study the case in depth in any way, shape, or form. The Killing of a President. Now, this book is out there in softcover and hardcover form and has not currently in print, I don't think. But, you know, it was for a very long time. And again, I don't care how you get it, you need it. What comes next? Well, there is the search for Lee Harvey Oswald, which, by the way, for years on Google, that was the book that I held in front of me when, you know, I took a picture. For some reason, I wanted something JFK related in front of me. And the very first interview I ever did about the case was on Lee Harvey Oswald. And guess what? This is what I was holding up in front of me. And, well, now we get to a book you can still get your hands on. And I am really happy when you can get your hands on this thing. And in fact, we might give you some special information about how to get a really special bookmark before we're all said and done tonight. And this one is much more current, absolute proof. And you know what? Between these, the photographic information in them, you know, even if you didn't know how to read, I got to tell you. And oh, by the way, the special bookmark looks a little something like this. It is a ticket from the Texas Theater from 1963, from a particular date, in fact, I think. But anyway, we'll let Bob tell you about that. Oops, I spoiled it. Bob Groden is the guy with us. Now, he worked on the House Select Committee on Assassinations as part of the group of people working on the photographic evidence. The film. He showed the Zapruder Film to the world, basically, on the Geraldo show in the 1970s. That is a historic piece of footage. I'm very sure if you've ever looked at anything on the case, you've looked at that piece of footage. I'm sure you've seen the Zapruder Film. Okay. Indeed, he's actually responsible for, I don't know, something like 80% of the most well-known, recognizable, and essential pieces of visual information that have been presented publicly. Oh, yeah, also autopsy photos, things like that he's put out there too, in magazine form, in, let's see, there were videos out there. I think there still are some videos floating around out there, although you got to be careful which copies you get. And these books, like I was just talking about, magazines. Oh, and you know what? He also used to get arrested in Dealey Plaza. I think something like 80 times he got busted in Dealey Plaza for doing what? Oh, sharing information with people, setting up a table and saying, here I am. I happen to have photographic information if you'd like to see it, and giving presentations right there just, a few feet away from what they call the grassy knoll, or maybe on the grassy knoll sometimes. Bob was doing presentations right there in Dealey Plaza, kept getting arrested some years ago, but thankfully that's not the issue today. Oh, and the last thing is that he's going to be at the Lancer conference, the 22nd of November, okay, this year, and I am going to be emceeing there, so I'm going to be hanging out with Bob, and I'm telling you right now, as I said on the Friday night call-in show, I don't know, last week, week before, you know what? It's worth the price of admission right there. You're going to get to hang out with a guy who was on the HSCA, part of that investigation. Not going to tell you which part, and we're not going to delve into that tonight, but he was there on that, as part of that investigation. He definitely, again, helped the world see the Zapruder film, but I mean, all kinds of stuff. Plus, he's got a presentation to give in Dallas, and that'll be November 22nd to the 24th of this year at the Dallas Marriott downtown. Okay. And if you go to assassinationconference.com, you can get your tickets there. And oh, by the way, if you'd like 10% off, Ochelli 10 is a discount code you can use and get 10% off of your tickets. Okay. But if you're going to go there in person or virtually, you can sign up at assassinationconference.com. And I urge you to do so. If you haven't planned already to go, you should. And I gave out a bunch of names, by the way, this week on another show with Larry Hancock, which the audio is just starting to make its way out there, where I gave you a whole list of names. Oh, hold on a second. That does remind me. That list of names, it just happens to be on the back of a limited T-shirt I'm going to have with me in Dallas. And there's your list of names. Whoops, wait a minute. I might not have here we go with the blind guy can't run the audio and the video at the same time, right? Anyway, for those of you listening on radio, you have no idea what's going on. But in the audio version, let me tell you, I'm holding up a T-shirt which has a bunch of the names, which does include Bob Groden and myself, Carmine Sabastano. Mike Swanson is kicking off the conference. Larry Hancock presenting virtually. We're not going to go there anymore. I've wasted enough time running my mouth. I have to talk to Bob Groden, and I'm going to focus on one small area, which is probably the most significant and important area when it comes to evidence and the visual, the film, the still pictures, all of it. I put this on the top of the list, the Zapruder film and its legitimacy. That's what I'm going to talk to Bob Groden about. But first, I got to shut up and ask him how he's doing. Bob, how are you tonight?
Doing well. Glad you seem to be doing fine.
Thankfully, I'm happy to be here with you. This is the first time you've ever done this show. I have no idea how to, compress your introduction into something that would take me only a minute to do. I'd have to talk very fast, but I mean, you're a guy with a huge background, and because you started working with this film, and you ended up working with seemingly every photograph that touched the case in over the decades now. And indeed, wait a minute. Is the 22nd also your birthday, by the way, of November? Is that something I remember too?
That's correct. I turned 18 the day it happened.
So,
I was lucky. I was playing hooky from school that day. And I was home. I heard the first reports on TV, which changed very quickly. The fact that I heard the original reports, which were the exact opposite of what they told us later on, that's what opened up my mind to the fact that there was something crazy going on here. Wow.
And there you go. So I'm actually going to see you on your birthday in Dallas this year, and an unfortunate one at that. Although, the universe lines things up for a reason. We'll leave it at that, and, everybody can discuss and figure out all of the ethereal concepts themselves. Let's talk about a little bit about you, though. I mean, how long had you been working with the Zapruder film? What would you say are the key things in your background when it comes to JFK stuff anyway, that you would present? Just a few bullet points, because like I said, if I wanted to lay out a good biography, if I wanted to give a good introduction that covered everything with you, I'd be here for another half hour. So what do you think are the key points? Like Bob Groden, who is Bob Groden?
Well, I'm a fellow who has worked with the photographic evidence for now 61 years. And the Zapruder film came into my possession through a story which I will tell you a little while, right now, suffice it to say that I have my hands on the original film, which was a miracle. A miracle. Researchers in the case have wanted to try to find the film and look at it for years and years. It wasn't until 12 years after the assassination that I was able to release the film to the public. I had it for several other years, but I I didn't have the opportunity to reveal it to the public. I was too afraid to initially. I mean, here we have the single most important piece of evidence in the case, and I couldn't show it to anybody. I was afraid to. If somebody had found out, if the wrong person or people had found out, I would have been in a great deal of danger. So it worked out very well. Fate was on our side, and Geraldo Rivera found out that I had the film because I showed it at a conference in Boston, and he called me up and asked if I would be willing to show the film on his show. Mm. And I said, yeah, if you're willing to show it, I certainly am. And we got together in New York and we transferred the film onto videotape, and we just showed the film on Good Night America. There were three segments to the show. The first one was Raquel Welch, of all people. Mm-hmm. The second one was a fellow who was dealing with the Bermuda Triangle, and mine was the third. And that was the highest rating that Geraldo ever got, was the Zapruder Film segment. And he repeated it again, and that got even more. So the film itself is what got the case reopened. And that's a whole story, which I'll tell you in a little while. That's certainly part of the story.
And it's remarkable in that up to that point, right, outside of it being shown in the courtroom in New Orleans, right, because District Attorney Jim Garrison had subpoenaed the film and it was shown, there, and it had been seen in still versions. There was the still version that was printed in the Warren Commission, these black and white frames in one of the volumes. So you could actually look at the frames in black and white form, really not that clear, but clearer than anything that, was out there, because there wasn't anything out there. And then after that, even, there was bootleg versions that traveled around, went to universities, but these things were terrible. I mean, I had my hands on one of those at one point, and there was a lot of white involved in it. Seemed like a lot of missing elements. Other people have talked about the muddy elements of it. I remember looking at it, seeing it as almost transparent. When I actually held this thing and looked at the frames, it was like nothing. It was like a bad photocopy of a bad photocopy of a bad photocopy. But nonetheless, it allowed people to see the film a bit. And a few of those bootleg copies traveled around in the late 60s and all the way up until you put a very good version up on Goodnight America. Is that not true?
Well, yes, that's very true. What happened was when Jim Garrison subpoenaed the Zapruder film for showing in the courtroom during the Clay Shaw trial, what they had was one that was purposely degraded. You could see the images, but you couldn't make out any detail. It was like visual mud. A copy was made of what he had and was bootlegged, which went around the country for years and years, but it was horrible. It was horrible. The copy that I showed at the Boston conference was almost pristine, but it could have been better than it was. What happened was that Geraldo's people wanted to slow it down so that they could, so that the eye could comprehend what it was seeing. And I offered to make them a slowed down version of it. They didn't want to bother with it. They didn't want to take the time. So it would have been a lot clearer if they'd have shown what I would have given them to them to do. But it did the job. It got out there, and all in all, it did change the history of the case. That's what got the case reopened.
Well, and that's the other thing, and I brought this up last night, actually, during a discussion where I said, look, you got to remember that there are often various events that come together to create a circumstance where something gets done. I talked about the ARRB, and everybody points to the Oliver Stone film. Oh, by the way, Bob makes an appearance in JFK, the movie. Just saying, he is in there briefly if you know where to find him, and I do. I'm not going to give it to you guys. Who knows? Maybe we'll use it as a trivia question and give something away around the time of the conference. Hint, hint. Anyhow, but here's the deal. Yeah, you're showing the film, okay, a general outcry from the public based on other congressional investigations. The Citizens Committee, these things came together to cause enough of a ruckus that we end up with the House Select Committee, in my mind. And you need all of those elements to come together. Okay, and in the 90s, not just the Oliver Stone film, but the long-standing campaign of Release the Files was definitely a pressure campaign that was going on. And I was living in New Jersey at the time, so I was very familiar with a guy named Bill Kelly and a few others who were actively involved in that. But there were people nationally, and here comes Geraldo again in that case too, by the way. He had various people out there that were advocating for Release the Files. But it took that pressure, the public's outcry from the JFK film, and a few other things to snowball. It's usually not just the one event, no matter what people point to. So I would say, Bob, that in effect, you even had a resonant effect in creating the HSCA in the first place, which you ended up then participating in.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. It's exactly what happened. When I showed the film on Goodnight America, a lot of people saw it for the first time. And what happened is a lot of people from Congress saw it, specifically the Virginia congressional delegation. They contacted me, specifically Congressman Thomas Downing of Virginia, and he asked me to come to Washington to the House of Representatives and show my evidence, not just the Zapruder film, the Nix film, the Muchmore film, and a few others as well, and my entire slide presentation, which took about 2 hours. And I showed them to the House of Representatives, and to my absolute amazement, Congressman Downing introduced legislation to reopen the case. It took a long time, it took about 2 years to do it, but eventually it did get open, and there was a second investigation, the first being the Warren Commission. The House Select Committee on Assassinations went into far more detail. Congressman Downing had me, he asked me if I would be the technical consultant for the photographic evidence for the committee, and I was for its full lifetime. We got to do a lot of work, and the showing of the Zapruder film of Goodnight America made more change to the issues of the assassination than anything else. Mm-hmm. I'm very, very proud of that.
Right. But again, now look, full credit to you, of course, for participating in that. But I would say also the fact that there were other congressional investigations which were showing that, you know what, the U.S. government might have been lying to us about a few things or hiding stuff. In various cases, we had Watergate previous to this. I mean, there is a general mood that started to come up that laid the groundwork for you to be able to come forward. So all of these things come together, and to my mind, you have to recognize that all of them participate in this. Now, I'm putting this aside, even though this in and of itself is worthy of discussion and coverage for the whole show. We could do 2-3 hours on just this and not cover everything. But I need to get to something else here. I mean, you participated in this historical influence, a campaign of influence, which you were part of, a big part of. And it does center on the Zapruder film. And we could talk about, Abraham Zapruder, the dress manufacturer, and how the film came. But let's put that aside for now. In the future, I'd love to do a very basic, let's get the 101 on this, Bob, and talk about it. I would love to do that, but not tonight. And here's why. A great many people are out there stating that this film is not legitimate, Bob. They will say that it's not a legitimate piece of evidence. In fact, there are people out there that say it's been fabricated. Now, I have said in the past that I see that the film has been altered at different times. In other words, there was damage to it. There were missing frames. There were things like that that went on. And also, if you see a version of the film where it is kind of stable and you're able to follow it because it appears very steady, that's generally a version that came from you, Bob. You're the guy who stabilized it, in my mind. I
True.
think first, and the best stabilization came from you. So if you see an unstable version of that film where it does move around quite a bit more, you're looking at something that came from a version before you stabilized it,
That's true.
or most likely. But
Yep.
so I can say that it's been altered in that way. But there are people out there that take it a lot further and they say it's been manufactured. Things have been added, things have been taken away. They took out frames. There was a full stop of the limousine, all this stuff. Now, I don't want you to answer the specific charges necessarily, Bob, not at all, because again, they have a list longer than my arm of those, complaints and allegations about how the film is not legitimate.
Well, let
They,
me explain to you why that happened,
okay,
and that'll lead it. There were two assassination in quotes researchers um, who came up with this idea the Zapruder film was faked. Why? Because they had specific theories. The Zapruder film disproved their theories, so they attacked it. Um, and as time went by, more and more people got involved with the concept that, oh, it's faked, it's faked, it's been altered. It has not been. Let me explain. The only damage to the film, the only thing that is you could consider retouching, is that there are 2 points in the film where there are missing frames. And the first splice takes place where there are 2 frames missing and 2 more damaged. The second one, there are 4 frames missing and 2 frames damaged. They are no longer missing. They call them missing frames, but you have my book, uh, and in this, let me take a minute to find it. In this, I actually publish all the missing frames. They are no longer missing. These are the 2 splices right here. See?
right.
This splice here was made famous by Josiah Thompson in his book 6 Seconds in Dallas. But that's because it's a very obvious one. You can see that. The other one here, the splice is hidden within the shrubbery here, and it's difficult to see. I'm the one who found this first splice. It was never advertised that it was there.
Mhm.
And when I was working on the film earlier on, I had the original film in my hand, the actual camera original. And as I was running it through my hand, like this, I felt the splice, the physical splice in my hand, and that's when I discovered it. Now everybody knows about it. But those are the only alterations to the film. Life magazine said that a junior lab technician did it by mistake when he was running down and making 4x5 transparency copies, that he accidentally closed something down on the film and tore it. Well, I find it difficult to believe that they pay $250,000 for a 21-second film and put it in the hands of somebody who didn't know what they were doing. And they've never released the name of the man who did it.
Right.
But the point is this. There are specific issues that have to be faked for some of the theories that other people have come up with. And it just got carried away. The Kennedy assassination is the biggest conspiracy in the history of the world. That's not enough for some people. They have to add additional co-conspiracies along with it. And they just enjoy the fact that saying that the Zapruder film was faked. The Zapruder film is the single most important piece of evidence in the entire case. When they attack it, they're attacking the single most important thing that we've got. And the defenders of the Warren Commission who must be laughing their tushies off, because the film is legitimate. We can prove that. We can prove it. And I'm going to go into all those things for you tonight.
Well, let me ask you this about these specific theories really fast, because I know what one of them is right off the bat, and that is the limo stopping issue.
Yeah.
Right? That's got to be it. That's got to be one of them, because they claim that frames had to be removed. Now, I don't even want to address that one usually because it is illogical. Okay. If you remove frames from a film, like they claim, well, they must have removed a bunch of frames, it speeds up the film. It makes things go even faster to a degree that I think these people don't understand what happens if you were to do something like that. And this idea that they have to force in this limo stop is because of eyewitnesses. Now, I realize why the eyewitnesses are saying what they're saying. I understand it. And it does have to do with the malleable nature of memory. And I mean, even the fact that Bill Newman was so close to the assassination, and for about 25 years, the man stated that he thought Kennedy literally stood up in his seat. Okay.
And that his ear was shot up.
Yeah. And that his ear was shot. Yeah, right. And this didn't happen. And he didn't realize that until he viewed the Zapruder film in the 1980s, which was kind of crazy. He hadn't seen it on Geraldo's show with you. He hadn't seen it previously, and he was still stating at that time in the 1980s, over 20 years later, he stood up in his seat. Now, that's not what he saw. That's what he interpreted. And there is a problem. Other people did the same thing with this limo stop, Bob. And
that's one of the major things. You bring up an extremely important point at this stage, and that is the car did not stop. It didn't. This is a drawing of the entire motorcade. Well, not most of it anyway. There's the president's car right here, and people that are right behind it are in line with it. The president's driver, Bill Greer, put his foot on the brakes and slowed down. He was stopping, but he didn't stop. And as he did that, people from behind that were behind saw the lights come on, and other than the cars in the back actually did stop. The car for the president did not. When they saw the cars slow down and their cars stopped, and they had seen the brake lights come on the president's car, they assumed that they all had stopped, and they had.
Exactly. And that's the thing about the assumption, because memory, look, information is constantly added to memory. It's not a recording device. So what happened is they saw these other cars stop, and because of that, that gave them the idea that they all stopped. Indeed, like you said, Greer hit his, and you can see in the film, by the way, in the Zapruder film, you can see that the light comes on and he's tapping his brake. Okay.
Right.
Now, I've observed that. I don't have the greatest vision, but if you take a little bit of time and study and look at the individual frames, a lot of them provided by Bob Groden, outside of the fact that, again, in the Warren Commission volumes, they misprinted. They actually put one out of order in there and all this other stuff, but they give you black and whites there. I'm told even in those, kind of bad black and white versions, you can see this brake light, okay? Yeah. I know I can see it in Bob Groden's version. I know I can see it in many stills, and I have all the frames in various forms digitally. But the thing is, this is what the problem is. He almost stops. He does come to a slowing down because there's a bit of confusion. And other cars in the motorcade did indeed come to a complete stop.
Well,
so
some of the people who keep spreading this crap about the Zapruder film being faked, they have 2 or 3 points of view that they bring up. One is that so many people said that the car stopped. This is a lie. People said it was stopping. Only 2 people said it actually stopped, and they were not really in a position to really tell. So they held all that. They bring it up all the time. The film's got to be fake because it doesn't show the car stopping. The Zapruder film, the Nix film, the Muchmore film, the Bronson film, all of them show the car during the moment of the headshot. All of this stuff, the car never stops. And by the way, the people who say the film is faked and they cut out sections, they're saying it because it backs their theories. If the car had stopped for the 2 minutes that the 2 seconds that they're saying, that's 37 frames. If you take out 37 frames, everybody who's in the foreground, the background, whatever within the car, if you stop, the car keeps moving, it would jump. The people would jump because a film is 18 frames per second. If you cut out 37 frames, that's 2 seconds. It will jump. People are moving around. There, people within the car. It's ridiculous.
A full second. Even if you removed 1 full second, Bob, you have people that are going to reach up and scratch their, neck. You have people that are reaching into their pockets, people that are waving, and all of that stuff would jump all over the place. And what is their answer? Well, they took the crowd out separately and pasted it back in. I mean, my point about this is actually that the further you go down that rabbit hole, the more elaborate the solution has to become. You have to remove the crowd, paste it in separately. They say, look, see, the crowd doesn't even really move, they say, because it's been pasted in artificially, and all these different things. But it just doesn't make logical sense. You'd have to reconstruct this thing in whole in order to get that effect. It's not a matter of removing frames. And indeed, if I were trying to create a slowing effect or a stopping effect for the car, I don't know, Bob, I would think you would want to add frames in. I'm just saying.
And one of the points is that they don't even tell you where they think it was done. They just say it was done. They can't find it. You can see it if it happened anywhere within the film.
Exactly. So let's move on. Yeah, go ahead.
One other thing they're saying, the other major thing they're saying is that they say the film was cut because you can't see the president's car come on to Elm Street from Houston, up in this area right here. Now, the thing is this. Abraham Zapruder's camera, like this, it's a manually held camera. It's not like a video thing whereby it's constantly going because it's battery operated. The Zapruder camera, which is just like this, in order to run it, you have to wind it up. You have to use the crank here to wind it up. And as you do that, and you want to film, you hit the shutter release, like so.
There you go.
And it winds down. As it winds down, it makes noise. You can hear the difference as it slows down. Right. Zapruder had been filming for quite a bit before the president even got there. So the camera either stopped or was stopping, and he knew it, and he started to wind it up. He took it away from his eye and started winding it. While it was down and he wasn't filming, that's when the car made the turn onto Elm Street. He saw that the car was there. Excuse me. And he put it back up, the camera back up to his eye, and started filming again, like so.
Right.
If he'd have kept filming the lead motorcycles and just had done the original beginning parts of this, since he didn't know where in the motorcade the president's car was, he'd have missed the assassination completely.
Well, there's that to consider, but it's also, remember this, for the listener, not for you, Bob, you know this, but it's a spring that we're talking about. There's a spring mechanism here. So there's a physical mechanism that winds down, and actually, over time, a lot of them become a bit inconsistent. Now, that particular camera maintained for a while, but eventually they become a little inconsistent. So for the concern that it may wind down, one, and two, the film was not very long. They didn't have an hour of tape here, an hour of film.
21 seconds.
Yeah. So there was only a short amount. So he was trying to make sure that he actually captured, again, not looking to capture the assassination, because who knew that was going to happen. But again, that's another argument people make. We're not going there. But if you don't know the assassination's happening, but you want to capture the president on film, he's not here yet. Let me wind it back up, make sure I'm ready, and here we go. So he was waiting to make sure that the president would be in his field of vision. And when he was, it starts again, which is why the president suddenly appears in the film.
There you go.
Just that simple.
Exactly right.
But yeah, go ahead. Continue on, though, please.
There's a whole bunch of other things too. A lot of the stuff that Janet and I have been working with, and Janet discovered all this. Janet's my wonderful wife, by the way. This is a way of showing 8mm film is like this. When it's shot within a camera such as Zapruder's, it's actually 16mm wide. It's called double 8. You shoot one side, you turn the film over, and then you shoot the other side. So it's 16mm wide. Okay. Why is this important? Because a fellow named Dino Brugioni, who worked for NPIC, a national photographic interpretation company, he had to, when he said they brought the original Zapruder film to him that night for analysis, he had to go out and buy a 8mm projector to show it. This is important. The Zapruder film itself, the original film, which was in fact double 8. I can find it here. Well, here it is coming out of the camera. That's what it looks like. It's 16mm wide, and it gets slit when it's processed. Okay. The original film itself would look like this, and it could not be. This is actually from a copy of this Zapruder film that was made before the film was slit.
Right.
This is home movie stuff on this side. This is the assassination.
Right. Now, this shows you, just to help you out with this, Bob, here, just for the listeners' edification. Look, it's real simple. It runs 16mm altogether, but only exposes half of that 16mm. While that's being recorded, it goes from one spool to another. And when that happens, it runs all the way out. You take the now newly filled spool and reverse position with the now empty spool in the camera, which when you turn it over means now you're going to expose the other half of the 16mm film coming back through. Now, Bob just showed you visually what that looks like. Okay, but just in your mind, think about this. So it is essentially a way to record over the same 16mm twice, but you're only using half of the film. Half the first time, flip it over, half the second time. Therefore, you have one image kind of facing, in its proper orientation upward, and then you have another image in its other orientation facing downward. That is the way it would look if it was an unslit copy. And this is the way the film gets printed. They print it in 16mm form. And there it is. It's both of them together, which you can run through, to my understanding, you can run through certain projectors, but it looks terrible because you have this confusing double-sided thing going on. But then what they do is they slit it in half, leaving only one side of sprockets, and then you take it and flip over the other piece and literally tape it together so that now you have doubled the length of the film. That's the thing to keep in mind here that Bob just described. I'm trying to fill in a little more because sometimes people get lost on these explanations, Bob. I mean, it's a simple thing.
I understand that. I'm trying to, that's the first half of the explanation.
Right.
Why is it important?
Yeah.
Dino Brugioni, who worked and did a lot of this stuff right after the assassination, he was brought a film. They told him it was the original film. Well, the problem is he didn't have an 8mm projector. And until the film was slit, it was still 16mm wide, and there's absolutely no way in the world that you could project it through, like so. There's no way you could project it through an 8mm projector. It's too wide. The film wouldn't fit into the projector. So he went out and he bought a projector and he showed 8mm film. The big problem that the people who say the film was faked have is the fact that the original film, 16 millimeters wide, wasn't slit until the following week. So when Brucioni said he was dealing with the original one, he was only saying it because that's what they told him it was. It could not have been. When the film was in Dallas, Kodak processed it, and another lab printed 3 copies of it.
Right.
Those 3 copies were slit right away that day. The original film was not. Brucioni could not have projected the original film. So the issue that the fakers, the faker backers are pushing is that since the film that Brucioni thought was the original doesn't show the car making the turn or the car stopping, it had to be a fake. It wasn't. This is very important to me because I took tremendous chance releasing the film in the first place. If I hadn't done it, no one would have seen it. I was very fortunate to be able to get away with doing it. But Life magazine, in their first issue, their memorial edition like that, they published black and white frames of Zapruder film, selected frames. Where did those come from? From the 8 millimeter original that had not yet been slit, and that was done in Chicago. But again, not till the following week. I know this is getting very technical and it's really involved. But if I ever do another book, I'm going to go into much more detail about this. But I've written 8 books on the assassination. In those 8 books, no one had ever brought up the concept of the film being faked because it's ridiculous. It could not have been. There are other issues too. An original film in the camera is what they call B-wind. Now, what the B-wind means is that if you hold up the film and you see it, you're looking through the base of the film because the emulsion would be facing the light source. Okay, so you're looking at it as B-wind. The Zapruder film original is B-wind. If you make a copy of it, it goes emulsion to emulsion, and then it becomes A-wind, and it reads backwards to the other side of the film. So there's lots of reasons such as this that show that the film is legitimate. And when one of the issues too that they're saying, which I'm going into too much detail with, is that this is the Zapruder film. This is from my copy. Okay, it's pristine. It's in beautiful shape. It's
that's nice.
The copy that the defenders of the or the people that go after the film that attack it, they're dealing with something that's absolute visual mud too. It's as bad, if not worse, than the
shock.
That Garrison had. It's not very clear. It's junk. What they're saying is that they see a hole hand painted in to the back of the president's head. Well, they're not.
Well, that was the next thing I was going to confront you with, Bob. And I want you to attack this. They have this whole theory about the black spot on the back of the head, where they say it's been literally colored in. And it does look strange in some prints. I got to be honest with you. It does look strange. But do I think it's been faked? No. But I don't know how to explain why this happened, or, there's a lot of interesting anomalies that come up, by the way, in film, especially in this process. There's a lot of things that can occur with light, with exposure, with the camera, with the lenses, et cetera, et cetera. But it does look weird. The back of JFK's head at a certain point looks so solid that it does appear almost like somebody colored it in. And a lot of them point to that, Bob. Okay. Is there something easy you can give us to knock that down?
Yes. My wife Janet and I were in a museum in Indiana, And they had a piece of artwork. Look at that. That's what it looked like. I took one look at this and said, damn, this is the area that would be considered the president's hair on the Zapruder film. And this is the hole in the back of his head. If you do densitometry readings on this as opposed to this, it's going to be different. That's what you would expect, and that's what you see.
Right.
That's the answer. Now, you have JFK absolute proof there.
Yes.
There are specific frames of the Zapruder film, frames 335 and 337, the two clear frames, the only clear frames of the back of the president's head after the headshot. This is a blow up of frame 337. Mrs. Kennedy is looking right at the exit wound on the back of the president's head. In 335 and 337, the head is in profile, and
Yes.
you see the avulsed area that was described by all of the doctors. Now, one thing I want you to please be aware of, I know you are, but anyone who's watching this should know. I'm not saying that Oswald acted alone. I'm saying there was a conspiracy. Oswald, based on the evidence, had nothing to do with it. I'm on the same side as the people who are saying the film has been faked.
Mm-hmm.
But they're doing it wrong, and they're taking the evidence that proves that we're right and just ignoring it. And that's absolutely dangerous. It's letting the other side just get away with it.
Oh, that's the thing. They're literally undermining one of the most important pieces. And we can draw a lot. I mean, if you see a good copy of this, and I don't mean you, Bob, because you've seen the best versions of this film. But the truth is, if you see this very closely, carefully, and you're able to view it in its best form, I can literally see blood splash on Jackie Kennedy's face.
Yes.
I can see her react and flinch to it. Okay. And this is not the best possible filming that was done. But when you look at the best possible copy of this, you can see a lot of details, the reflections of things in the hood of, not the hood, in the body, in the paint of the car. You can see things on the rear trunk of the car that are reflections. Okay. There's a lot of detail that can be seen if you see a good copy of this.
Well, Jackie climbs down in the trunk of the car and picks up a piece of the skull. That
Right.
you can clearly see. Once again, the copies that I have were made directly from the original, and they're flawless, just flawless. The stuff that they're looking at is like multi-generation.
Exactly.
There's a technique they call it 4K, which means it deals with the amount of resolution within a frame. They got a garbage copy of the film, and they got a 4K copy of garbage,
Right.
and that's what they're dealing with, and it's ridiculous. I have, we spoke before about my DVDs before we started doing all this. These are two DVDs which I have. This one is a full documentary on the Kennedy case. It has the highlights of all the films, has
Right.
exclusive interviews with the Dallas doctors and things of that nature. This one has intact versions of all the films of the assassinations. In fact, a total of 122 between the motorcade and the assassination and the investigation. These are clearer copies than anyone else has got, and they're available.
And tremendous. Let me say something about that before you're done talking about that. They are available. I want you to tell people where to get them, but I'm going to tell people why to get them. And here's the thing. It's not just that the headshot and the events of the murder are memorialized in the Zapruder film. You can see this in the Nix film. You can see this in the Much More film. And now there's also a couple of others in there that people often do not mention. The Bell film, for instance, shows the headshot A lot of people never mention that, and I know why. Look, it's very, very hard, even with you enhancing the Bell film, it's very hard to make out things on it because of the way he shot the film. And there's yet another film on there that shows the headshot. And which one is that, Bob?
Well, the Nix film shows it.
You're right, Nick's much
The
more.
opposite side of the street from Zapruder. Oh, jeez. Hold on a second.
Yeah, no problem at all. I'll just continue on with what I was saying.
You know what happened with my phone went off in my ear. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. Are you okay?
All right. There's a lot of things. The Nix film, we'll talk about that in a minute too. But there's a lot of things that show that the Zapruder film is genuine.
Right.
They're saying that it's been faked, and the reason why the film had to be spliced at the point where the car begins after the turn. Well, there is something that happens in film that doesn't happen in videotape. That's called flash frame. You had mentioned before that there's a spring tension on the Zapruder camera.
Mm-hmm.
When you start filming, it takes a fraction of a second to get up to running speed. So the first frame is given more light and it clears. It's called a flash frame. This is a section of the A side of the Zapruder film.
Mm-hmm.
This is a regular exposure. This is the first frame. You see how much brighter it is? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's because it actually travels through the gates slightly slower, therefore has a greater amount of exposure to light. Is that correct?
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
So the point of the matter is that same type of flash frame occurs at the first frame when the car comes into view and Zapruder starts filming. That's just one more piece of evidence that's genuine, that's legitimate. There is, when you see the Zapruder film, the way I present it within the book, you're getting to see more detail. Yeah.
There's more detail. Mm-hmm.
And Ray, let me call you. I'm doing a radio show right now. Let me call you
Live.
right back.
This is what happens when we record live, folks.
I'll call you right back in a little while, okay?
I just sent them a text.
Oh, thank you. All right.
No problem, Bob. Go ahead. Continue.
I apologize. I forgot where I even was.
Well, you were explaining after the flash frame, right, that's present, and then you were going to explain something else after that, the legitimacy past the flash frame, which is shown right after the turn, which reveals to you that this was obviously the start of the film once again with the spring.
Correct.
And all of that. So
you would not have a flash frame if, in fact, it had been an edited duplicate with the area cut out there. The flash frame is the key. Most people don't even know that flash frames even exist. But I've been in the motion picture industry doing this kind of stuff for 35, 40 years now, and I know what to look for. The point of the matter is I can't explain the emotional reasons why people feel they have to attack the film. There's only actually about a half a dozen of them, but we've got one character who's insisting the film is faked, who says he knows it's fake because you only see one Secret Service agent jump on the back of the car, on the trunk. There only was one, Clint Hill. This guy, for some reason, believes that there were two of them back there, and they edited it out to cut the other guy off the trunk of the car. Why? Only heaven knows. If you're going to fake the film, and you can see this very clearly in the book, you're going to cut out any part of the film that challenges the official fiction. If you're going to do it, you're going to cut out the frames that show the back of the head at 335 and 337. The doctors all said that the head wound in the back of the president's head was avulsed outwards. It was just, the skull was out, every part of the head looked like a volcano. You see that in the Zapruder film. They would have cut those things out. They cut out the fact that the president was thrown to the rear when he was hit in the head, showing that the shot came from the front. They don't. It's right there. Right. Why would they leave that in and cut something else out? You can ask the defenders of the film if they know what they're doing. If they know what they're talking about, they'll back it all the way. But the people who attack it, the one question you can ask is, "Cui bono?" Who profits? Why do it? There's no value to it.
The only devil's advocate issue I can give you, and I can give it to you and then knock it right down, Bob, without a problem, is that some people might say it was specifically done to add confusion, to make sure that, okay, you don't have the official story, but also the real story of the conspiracy is hidden this way too. And therefore you have a document which does not support any story properly. And then I say, well, look, there's a couple of problems here. And one of them is you'd also have to fake a Polaroid that kind of goes along with it because, you know, there was this lady there that was using a Polaroid camera. And I got to tell you, Polaroids are probably the last thing that anybody who works with photographs ever wants to work with photographically because they're horrible. You know, you literally have chemical spray all over the damn thing. I mean, they're nice for what their purpose was, you know, in the time that they were popular and all that for home use. But to try and do something with that, to try and alter it, oh my goodness. I mean, I don't even want to think about the kind of project it would take to alter that. And I'm talking about Mary Moorman's photo. Those are Polaroids originally. So
Mary Ann Moorman is a very close friend of both of us, of Janet and myself. And I've had in my hands, when I worked for the House Assassination Committee, 2 of the 3 pictures she took on Elm Street. The third one was given to a police officer who destroyed it. And it showed the 6th floor window with nobody in it. Okay, anyway, I have a copy in the book that shows Mary Moorman's picture taken from a first day copy negative done at Channel FAA, the channel TV channel in Dallas, and it shows very clearly the hole in the back of the head that the people who were attacking the film just ignore.
Right. Well, and that to me is a key because you would again have to work with that. Okay. Look, if you take a look at what's out there on the internet, sure, it's inconclusive. But that's because of the nature of the copy, being a copy, being a copy, being a copy, and then the digital process, which makes a mess out of it even further. So you can't use that. All right, fine. What about the other films that corroborate the Zapruder film? Some of these guys even get into an explanation where those have been altered too. And that is just a level of insanity I can't match up. So let's knock it all down. You can't possibly have accomplished this, in my mind, as fast as they did broadcast the Much More film shortly after the assassination. That was broadcast. Okay, that was one of the few things that actually made it to broadcast. So that went out there. We know it's been memorialized. Come on now. They made the Much More film match up to this right away. I thought it took all the way through the weekend with all these stories to get it all done, right? So you got a problem here. Anyway. The point is, I mean, I think those are the key points that people go to. You know, well, what? You don't believe the CIA would do this? Absolutely, I do. But could they have? Do we have evidence?
They could have, but they didn't.
Right.
I just realized what I was talking about before when the phone rang.
Sure.
This particular, I call him screwball, person who attacks the film, says he can tell it's fakes because the Secret Service guard, Roy Kellerman, is sitting next to the driver. He jumps out of the car, but it doesn't show it. He stayed in the car all the way to the hospital. He never left. This guy comes up with stuff out of his, you know what?
Yeah.
And I'm not even going to get into names, any of these people, because it's just crazy. some of these people believe the garbage that they're saying. Other people know that they're lying.
Mhm.
It's hard to tell sometimes which is which. But some people have pretty good credentials in other areas.
Mhm.
But do you know what an f-stop is?
I would love for you to explain it best. I've read about it and, I have a basic idea, but I would love for you to explain it because you bring it up on almost every interview. I love it. You always say, they don't know an F stop from a bus stop.
Yeah,
That's one of your favorite phrases. But
you just grabbed my line. But
I grabbed
okay.
your mind, but can you explain it to people though? Because
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
have had that question asked to me. What is an F stop? So please.
Let me explain to you that a friend of mine said nobody knows photography. All they know is videotape, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
So the f-stop is the size of the aperture that allows more or less light in to the raw stock or unexposed negative. Now that you've mentioned it, I'll mention it myself too. The people who are attacking the Zapruder film don't know an f-stop from a bus stop.
Right.
And it's absolutely, absolutely key to know that people that claim that I've been in the film business for 20 years. Doing what? Working in the office, filling out paperwork. They don't know the techniques. They don't know what to look for. One thing that I nearly forgot to mention is in the Zapruder film itself, the camera original has information in the picture area. And on the left-hand side, it's got pictures between the sprocket holes,
Yes.
which are not within the so-called regular picture area. The original film has that information between the sprocket holes. All the duplicates do not.
Mm-hmm.
The one that Brugioni and the others have dealt with did not have the information between the sprocket holes. And therefore, they were not working with the original film. It was that simple.
Now, just to explain this again to somebody who might not understand, the sprocket hole. What happens here is that there is a kind of an imperfection here where light is being exposed onto a part of the film that's not meant to capture image. It's there to be, what it is, the sprockets, right? The sprockets are supposed to grab it and carry it through the projector or carry it through the camera as it's being run through. And that's not an area that's meant to capture image. But the thing is, it's a little bit askew somehow, and therefore it's getting exposed. That's not supposed to happen, and you'll find variations in this because people have taken other versions. Like they've taken basically Zapruder's camera, but not Zapruder's camera, one just like it. And you'll get different exposures in those sprocket holes sometimes, right? Where it doesn't go all the way over, it goes only a little bit over or not at all, and things like that. So, yeah.
These are the sprocket holes I'm pointing to.
Right.
Those are the things. There's a claw that goes to the camera and then into the projector that stabilizes and holds the film in the right position.
Mm-hmm.
That's on the original on Zapruder's camera. It doesn't happen on all cameras, but it happened on his, where it's actually image being captured on film between there.
Right.
And again, I have to waste so much time dealing with why we know the film is real and why it's not. And why it's important is because it shows what actually did happen. And what they're trying to say, people who attack the film say it doesn't show it actually happened, it shows other things.
Right.
As we mentioned before, if they were to cut out the 2 seconds that they're talking about, everybody in the car would jump from point A to point B.
Right.
And the president would be going from this to this in one frame instead of a series of frames.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
When you remove frames in between, movements, you're going to have what appears to be super fast movements. That used to be something they did as a special effect in a very basic way for films where you were creating an image where somebody, moved. They were able to run, 20 feet in less than a second. How could you do that? You could remove a bunch of frames, and in less than a second, they are 20 feet in another direction. No problem. That's the type of effect you would get by removing frames. And that's what you have to remember here. And I mean, I'm really explaining this in the layman's way, best way. I know that you know all the technical things and you actually understand film, which again is a whole different thing from what we see in video and digital versions, etc.
You're absolutely right.
All of
Absolutely.
this having been said, Bob, does this cover the main keys you think for what people should know regarding this Zapruder film fakery idea, or is there one more thing, or should we be looking to you in Dallas for a presentation? Because my understanding is this might come up during your presentation in Dallas.
It will. You know, again, you bring that up. That's an important point too. There are a whole bunch of other issues that we could be spending time dealing with, and we don't get to even talk about those because we have to spend so much time dealing with this craziness that comes up on in the minds of people that really don't know what they're talking about.
Exactly.
So some of these people are already they have technical issues that they're familiar with in other areas that don't deal with specifically the mechanics of film. The Zapruder film is legitimate. Absolutely, there's no question about it. You couldn't fake it and have it do what you did. There's an issue called jump cut, which is if you had this guy here and somebody else over there that looked like him, you could eliminate the frames in between and splice one to the other and get a jump cut. That does not occur in the film at all. There's nobody like that. There aren't that many people on the far side of the street. One of the researchers who came up with the idea that the film is faked feels that all the people standing in the crowd on the north side of Elm Street are all cardboard cutouts. Really? What about the people who were really there? Where are they? Again, the Zapruder film, the Nix film, the Muchmore film, and the Bronson film. We have those four. The fifth one, the Oliver film, was taken by the FBI. We've never seen it. I've released all the others. I've released 122 films of the assassination, the motorcade, the follow-up, the investigation. I even released I shouldn't even get into this, but I've even released in Absolute Proof the autopsy photographs of the president, which are not yet released officially, won't be. The earliest is supposed to be released is 2039, and we don't think they're ever going to be released even then.
Yeah, good luck on that. As we watch the can get kicked down the road, even with the Assassination Records Review Board, I am not holding my breath for that release date. I wanted to just touch on one other thing. You know, I'd love to spend time talking about a lot of things with you, Bob, that we did not touch upon tonight. And I'm just going to bring up one of them, which is a great feature in Absolute Proof. There was a roll of film apparently taken where we now for the first time see some images that had never been seen by anyone before, as far as I know, of a surgical theater and someone being operated on in that book. And you got it off of a roll of film that had not been developed for many, many years. And indeed, you had a hard time even pulling images out in the first place, but you've actually created a set of images in this book that I would love to spend a full show discussing with you. What is it we see in here? What's going on? Maybe you could give people a hint and another good reason why it's an expensive book, but it's expensive because it's very expensive to print high quality copies of photographs, my friends. And that's what you have is high quality photographs throughout this book. And, Bob will tell you how many. And of course, he's got the other two big books, which released plenty of photos before this. But this is one of the very unique things in the book, Absolute Proof. Would you mind just telling people what that is or a little bit about it?
In The Killing of a President and The Search for Lee Harvey Oswald, and before that, High Treason and The Killing of... I've written 8 books on the case. Absolute Proof is the only one that's still really available. I was the first non-authorized person initially to see the Zapruder. I'm sorry, the autopsy photographs.
Right.
I've seen and handheld the originals in the National Archives. There were originally 152 pictures. There's only 15 of them left. I published them all in the book. There is one photograph that's not supposed to exist. I think this is what you're talking about. It's a black and white. With the size of film is called 120. It's a 120 piece of film, and there's a series of images on that. They're all pretty much the same image, but they start underexposed. Instead of getting brighter and brighter, they get worse and worse until you can't even see anything. There is not any inventory in the archives or in the Warren Commission or anything like that that explains these pictures. They show the president from about mid-thigh up to over the top of his head, and we're looking at him from the left side. And he's lying on a table. This is supposed to be something which doesn't even get explained. There are a lot of pictures that are missing, but this is the only thing that's not supposed to exist, which does. I have no way of explaining how or why, but I publish all the pictures that I could, including the autopsy pictures. I felt it was important to see it because when you see the condition of the president's head and compare it to what the government said, it's completely different. There were two situations, one for the Warren Commission and one for the House Assassinations Committee, where they had artists drew drawings of the president. The first was done for the Warren Commission by a fellow named Skip Rydberg. And Mr. Rydberg was not allowed to see the president's body, was not allowed to see the autopsy photographs. They just told him what to put there. The second was for the House Assassinations Committee. They hired an artist. Her name was Ida Dox Maloney. The official name she uses professionally is just Ida Dox. Mm-hmm. Janet came across a saying. So she left something in a report. Sweetie?
When she was asked about the drawings, she said that she made the drawings to illustrate the conclusions of the medical panel.
Not what they actually showed.
You need to repeat that.
Yeah. Well, I can't do it as well as you just did. Were you able to hear that, Chuck?
Oh, no, I heard it. Yes, absolutely. The conclusions of the medical panel, not
illustrated.
Yeah, that's what was illustrated. Yes.
She did what they told her to do. And there was another thing too during one of the meetings that was going on, where Michael Baden, who was the head of the medical panel, said to her, "Ida, you can do better than this." He didn't like the fact. Now, in my book, which you've seen, showing the pictures of the back of the president's body,
right,
there are two holes in his back. The House committee never once mentioned that, but I'll show it to you here.
Well, it's funny because in the Doc's images, what we have here is a bunch of missing information. It does look to me like she must have seen the photos, but clearly she left out tons of information. And the funny part to me is that these people, some of them who claim to be, photographic experts, don't realize that they're looking at a drawing. Number one, and number two, make statements like, "Look at how much more cleaned up he is in these images."
Well,
and it's very funny. It's not just cleaned up; it's literally redacted by her drawing. But you're showing us something different in the back, and then I have something else to show you. But go ahead.
this is the president, his back.
Right.
The Warren Commission said that the entrance hole of the bullet was in the back of the president's neck. Who pushed this? Gerald Ford.
Yes.
And he did it to clarify the image. There is no hole in the back of the president's neck, none at all. There are two holes in his back, the entrance wound from the depository or somewhere from behind, and the exit wound from the throat wound, right next to each other. This one here, the larger of them, which is too large to be a Carcano bullet hole, came from the front and exited his back. Just below that is the entrance wound with a, oh heck, what do they call it?
Abrasion collar?
That's it. Thank you.
Mhm.
You can write my next book for me.
No problem. I'll help you.
The abrasion
In fact,
collar is
yes.
in the second one. What the House committee did is that docs draw the back, eliminating the entrance wound, but showing the exit wound and calling it an entrance wound.
Right.
It was dirty stuff.
Yeah, no, it was amazing what was done there. And the thing is, look, I had a decent copy, and I wish I still had them, but I lost my copy of the what I would call the Fox set,
Oh, yes.
which was made from a very good copy at the time. I could see a lot of detail in those that I've never seen anywhere. No offense to you, even Bob, but even in your book, I had a very good copy that was better than even what I see in your book at one time, because it was allegedly made from, there was a contact negative made at one point, and mine was made from that negative. Initially, when those photos started to circulate, they were just photos, and then someone created a negative. Well, that negative supposedly generated my copy, and I had 8x10s, and I was very proud of that copy, but my ex-wife didn't allow me to keep them. Anyway, but there's a
we
lot
can
of
do
detail
something
in those
about that.
photos. What's that?
I've got them.
Well, I would love to have if there's some way. I mean, look, I don't know what it would cost you or whatever, but if there's a way I could acquire another set of those, believe me, I'd love to have them.
Well, the Fox pictures were taken, they were black and white,
Yes.
and they were taken by an FBI agent named Fox. And that's where they came from, black and white. Mine
Right.
are color.
Yeah,
Made
but my set, yeah, my set still contained a lot of information though, Bob. I loved that set. Anyways, I want to show you what it was I was going to ask you about, which wasn't that photo, but these images you see, where we have doctors in.
Oh,
Yes, you see what I'm talking about now.
yeah.
And I'm probably a little out of focus here, but I assure you guys, if you get the book, this is one of the things that right there is why you need to get this book. This is just two of the pages. There's multiple pages of this, and there's doctors appearing to get ready for surgery here. Yes, indeed.
Those pictures were taken of Lee Harvey Oswald on the operating table when they're trying to save his life. This is after he shot and before he died. The last pictures of him in life are taken there, life of him being alive, and the first shots of him when he died. And the thing is, nobody even knew they even existed. And I came across them some years ago. The films had not even been processed yet. They hadn't even been developed. I took them to the only place in the world that still processed that type of film. And we got them processed, and the thing is, they were damaged. This was like more than a dozen years after they were taken, and they had been heat damaged, water damaged, whatever. And when we processed them, there was no image at all on them, virtually nothing. I came up with an idea of using a fluid called Farmer's Reducer, which eliminates what they call a DMAX, or the really dark blacks of the pictures. We put it onto a computer-generated processing machine, and it brought out 89 pictures. The most important ones I put into the book.
Right, and I just wanted to state that is images that we had never seen before. Now, it's funny because if you're telling me these were basically acquired by you well, you were working with them in 1978, about 15 years after the assassination.
No, much later.
These were much later. One of the doctors, unauthorized, took the pictures. The authorities at the hospital confiscated them and never processed them. They were given by the doctor to the people at the hospital. The person at the hospital who had them gave them to a friend of mine who gave them to me, and I had them processed, and that's why we even have it.
It was like 40 years after or something. It was much later.
About 40 years. So you're right. Huh?
2003 or so then, like maybe 20 years ago, you were working with these then. By that. Okay. I just wanted to clarify that because I wasn't sure. But the interesting thing here, though, is that these are images nobody's ever seen before. There are also images of Oswald's autopsy in there. There are images from the Zapruder film, the various other films that are in there, the analysis of it. And like I showed you earlier, that ticket from the Texas Theater. Here we go. I put it in plastic. I put it in one of those protected plastics. But from the Texas Theater, that's an actual ticket from the day Oswald. Look at that. See, now he's got a string of them there, and he's going to include one of those as a bookmark in absolute proof for as long as, well, supplies last, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're good. They're getting rarer and rarer as time goes by.
Well,
Nobody else has them.
Exactly. So keep that in mind, and all the information to be able to acquire absolute proof is going to be in the show notes with the podcast. Or if you're watching this video, you'll be able to see it below, and you'll be able to contact Janet Groden or Bob Groden, one or the other, directly, and get the book from the author. Now, there are other books available too, but they are not in print. Absolute proof is still kind of readily available. If you go to the conference, though, I'm willing to bet you'll be able to get a hold of all three books. And
Just ask.
you just have to ask, right? If you contact Janet Claire 29, okay, spell this out, JANETCLAIR 29 @gmail.com. Janet Claire 29. Okay, one more time, JANETCLAIR 29 @gmail.com. You can get in touch with her and figure it out. $80 to buy the book, $20 to mail it in the U.S. If you live somewhere outside of the U.S., different arrangements might have to be made because postage ain't going to be $20. But otherwise, yeah, you can start there. I would advise you get a hold of all three of the big books. If you can, the magazines that Bob has put out, other books Bob has put out, for instance, High Treason, the first one, not the second one. High Treason, is a good book. Because I had personal interactions with a guy who was a co-author of yours at one time. And anyway, you and I will talk another time about that.
Okay.
Maybe not suitable for air. Anyway, it is what it is. But yeah, so High Treason, yes. Also, Bob has co-authored a couple other pieces. But I advise strongly that if you're serious about the case and you're interested in getting the information for yourself and studying the visual information, you need those three big books. You need the two videos that Bob showed you, okay? And you can get a lot of other stuff that has Bob Groden's name on it because, as we've said here, look, he's got a 6-decade now long plus history working with the photographic evidence. And on his 18th birthday, happy birthday again, Bob, on the 22nd, which I'll be able to say to you in person when I see you in Dallas. Guess what? That's the day the president was assassinated in Dealey Plaza. But meanwhile, we'll be in Dallas, myself and Bob Groden. I'll be the MC. Bob is going to talk to you about, guess what? Films and photos. And what is the title of your presentation? Do you have a title yet?
Not really. Essentially, what it comes down to is it's dealing with the legitimacy of the Zapruder film. Like I said, I'm wasting so much time, but it's so important. This is my legacy, for crying out loud. Right. I could have ended up in jail. I could have been shot. I could have, who knows? And you know the story. In Dealey Plaza, when I got to Dealey Plaza, I started to talk to people about this. The city of Dallas ticketed me 84 times.
Oh,
they threw me in jail twice because they didn't want this information out. Let me give one last description on the book, if I can. The book has got 1,000 pictures in it, literally 1,000 pictures. About 700 of them have never been released before. The entire book is on acid-free semi-gloss paper, so it'll never fade, never yellow. I'm very, very proud of it. Of the 8 books I've written, this is as good as all the others put together. Thank you.
Absolutely. But look, I'm telling you guys now, I don't care if you find it used, if you pick it up from Bob directly, I strongly advise you to get the other two as well. They are a 3-volume compendium of the best photographic evidence that you're going to get your hot little hands on without having to go out and chase things down for about 30 years. Okay. I'm just telling you, that's what it would take you probably to assemble these things yourself if you were to go and get decent copies of various things. I mean, I have a hell of a time even getting press photos at this point, right? But we've been through all that before on the show. I'm extremely happy. Thank you, Bob Groden, for, taking, now we took more than an hour, I'm sorry, but we can't compress this into an hour, to be honest with you. But I look forward to seeing you in Dallas, which again, the Lancer conference will be from the 22nd to the 24th at the Dallas Marriott downtown. Okay, so you'll be able to attend there. And if you go to assassinationconference.com and use the discount code Ochelli10, you'll get 10% off of your ticket. Also, student prices are available. I advise you to go there in person, but if you can't, you can attend virtually. And Bob Groden is definitely worth the price of admission all by himself. So with that all having been said, I'm done for tonight. We didn't take commercials or anything, but hey, what are you going to do? It is what it is. And I'm glad that you could join me. I'm merely Ochelli. All of you are indeed the effect. Robert Groden was my guest, and look down below, either in the video or in the podcast description, to follow through and get yourself a copy of Absolute Proof or anything else you can by contacting Bob Groden and following up on the photographic evidence in the JFK assassination.
Thank you, Chuck, for everything you did. I look forward to meeting you.